Before we get started, check the link in the description for this episode's notes and a free Warrior Mindset ebook. Now, on to our show.
When you said something very important, the word denial came to mind as a chief defense against what exists,
It's more than just a river in Egypt. Is that how they say it?
Yeah, we can get so sober and serious about this stuff, almost talking like we're at a funeral or something.
Sure.
Where this can be playful and delightful.
Sure.
As well as serious and important, significant.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the idea. Is it's supposed to be, life should be joyful, essentially.
Yeah, well, joy is one of the fruits of the sacred spirit. If the sacred spirit energy is saturating our soul, if the spirit energy is saturating our soul and dropping those key seeds in the soil of our soul, and those seeds in the soil of our soul become fruit, meaning they become expressive, they become attitudes in myself to want to express it, and then it leads to behaviors that do express it. Like one of the seeds is kindness. And if that seed is implanted in that's, thank you for your kindness to adjust this mic. Hi, Mike. I know I'm being silly today. I don't know why. Maybe because the sunshine is out for a change,
Yeah.
And in Michigan, that Michigan winter, that's kind of rare.
It's amazing that little difference. Like if it's pointed like this, or if it's pointed towards your mouth, you can get the brilliance of your voice a lot better.
Right. But don't want to kiss the mic. Don't want to be that intimate.
No, it's supposed to be like here.
Right. Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah. So, but anyway, but joy, and joy to me means, not just superficial ha happiness, but a sense of life as a form of play. Life can be playful as well as serious. And our continuing eternal inner child continues to express ourselves through play. Why do people love play? Because it frees us from the persona armament of being so adult, to daring to be a kid again. And just laughing, when I played racquetball, being a little bit younger, I loved the freedom of to be just crazy running around and getting to that ball and strategic and it just playful, and my inner child would just, in a sense, the racquetball court is like a holy court for holy playfulness of our inner child. Really.
Yeah, I always had trouble with racquetball. I'd run into the walls. I'm a little bit lanky for a racquetball court.
So kindness, joy, those are sacred seeds that the sacred energy implants in the soil of our soul. Really, really. Gentleness. Man, about that kindness, gentleness, patience, love, self-control, generosity, peacemaking.
Well, and that's not to say that, we shouldn't allow for non-joyful feelings.
Of course.
I think we can get into an attitude too of where we have to paint over what's actually there and pretend to be
the danger of a kind of a Pollyanna defensiveness.
Sure, Pollyanna. That's the word. I
don't want to face the challenging, the terrible, the horrible, the not right.
Because then I'd have to admit that that's part of my reality or part of myself, and then that would ruin your egoic sort of image that you've built up of yourself.
Yeah.
which limits your potential for growth.
Right.
When you're not willing to look at those parts of yourself.
Yeah.
That may not be Pollyanna or perfect.
No.
Especially, now this comes up, especially when you like to blame other people, which is what we like to do culturally right now at this point in our lives. We're very, very blame mentality.
I agree.
You can see it in the way our court systems work. You can see it in the way our news systems work, our politics, our social media. We like to pile up on people for not being perfect. But then if you do that with other people, if you're constantly pointing out the flaws in other people, that same sort of thing is going to be going on within yourself, but then you're going to creating a cognitive dissonance, I would say might be the right term for it.
That's well put, yes.
Yeah. So to where, how if you're blaming other people with such reticence towards them being sort of evil, then how could you for a second honestly look at yourself?
Right.
Because look how you treat people who make mistakes.
Well, it's a fundamental kind of defensiveness to blame others, and of course, Yeshua is quoted in the Gospels to say, "Why do you point to the speck in your sister's or brother's eye," meaning judgmental, blame, or shame, and not look at, and the interesting term is look at the log in your own.
Right.
And of course, a lot of people might think, log in your eye? Well, isn't that an exaggeration? But think about it. When I've had a little speck, stuck on my eye, it looks like a log. It looks like a log.
Right.
And so the inference in, Yeshua's statement is pretty powerful, that the thing that I project on others is probably a pretty big thing in my soul, in my psyche, in my life, to look at. And I might be afraid to admit to it because when I face it, seems like a log. But actually, it really is a speck. It really is a speck. Looking in the mirror and looking at our own shortcomings can be spectrified, delogified.
Right.
And this is maybe intuitive.
Yeah.
But let me show, and I might have given you a copy of that sheet before.
I don't think I've seen this one.
In my work with addiction, and, in different settings, including at El Camino Hospital in California, Mountain View, where I was the co-director of the outpatient program and did other things. But, one of the patterns of the addicted mind, the addicted soul, is to be easily shame-based. In other words, not accepting who I am, not loving who I am, not daring to even face who I am. And hence, I project anything that I fear to look at, like specks on my personality. I project. It's you. And so there is a step 10 of the 12 principles of spiritual growth, healing, not just superficial recovery, but a deepening in spiritual living that leads to compassion and care for others. Step 10 involves a daily inventory. In other words, daily look in the mirror and say, what kind of human being was I today?
Mm-hmm.
How did I relate to friends?
Which gets definitely easier as time goes on.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah. And in our treatment, in outpatient treatment, we gave this sheet to people in the program. Mm-hmm. And you can see that the daily inventory, every day, you check yourself off on typical problems that characterize the psyche of the addicted soul. Okay, look at the list. Self-pity, making excuses, dishonesty.
This is something I will be able to make available on the video.
Oh, yeah. Impatience, hate, dislike, or anger, false pride, intolerance, jealousy, envy, resentment, procrastination, sloth, selfishness, negative thinking, immoral behavior, criticizing, self-condemnation, interesting term, self-condemnation, and manipulation. And what we say to people, at the end of the day, go through this list and you make a mark. If you can admit to yourself, I was really filled with resentment today, and that led me to being inappropriately angry with friends, and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But very important is to go across on the sheet and look at the assets, the spiritual assets of being in healthy recovery from any kind of hindrance and addictiveness. The list of assets: feeling good, admitting to things, being honest, patience, love, humility, tolerance, generosity, forgiveness, action, meaning you act on behalf of sharing, positive thinking, caring, acceptance, loving myself, and being straightforward. And these assets are the counter to the problems. So instead of getting caught in self-pity, hey, why don't you make a list of what you feel good about?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. Instead of being self-condemning, how about making a list of things you appreciate about yourself, that you love yourself about,
Sure.
Love your neighbor as yourself is a fundamental maxim in biblical spirituality.
I think we get caught up in thinking that we have to stay focused on the negative feeling until it goes away, like until we solve it or until it goes away. But I think in my experience, the reality is that never actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just perpetually till the end of time likely would just stay focused on the negative feeling. It exists within the realm of existence. You're not solving it and making it go away. It exists.
Yeah.
Those ways of perceptions, those ways of looking at yourself in a negative light, they're patterns of thought that we can grab onto or tune into. They're vibrations. They're
they
like
are
turning
real.
into a radio dial. They're real things that you can't solve.
And that's why the major defense that we employ to not anything that we don't want to look at, no speck in my eye here, is denial. When you said something very important, the word denial came to mind as a chief defense against what exists.
It's more than just a river in Egypt. Is that how they say it?
Yes, we're all wet in denial.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the other two big defensive maneuvers when I don't want to look at a speck in my eye is, of course, minimization. It is not a problem. Oh, once in a while, da-da-da-da-da. And then also rationalization,
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, I mean, this is definitely getting into what I was talking about with, like, for instance, social media. It's just saying it in the reverse, is that it's not the root cause isn't blaming other people. That's the effect of not being able to look at yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Step 10, the daily inventory. It's like, to put it one way, I'm not sure I like the best way here, kind of a cleaning house. Brushing your psychic teeth, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that we tend to do is to pile up bad feelings about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But if we project them and don't face them, we start developing a whole big pile of crap that we don't want to face in ourselves. Whereas daily inventory allows us to get rid of it today. So if I did mistreat someone, instead of pretending otherwise to myself and then distancing from that person, projecting distance because I feel guilty somehow,
Mm-hmm.
admit to it. Come back next day to your office mate and say, hey, look, I'm sorry. I realized last night as I was thinking about it that I was a jerk yesterday, and I'm really sorry. I respect you. I like you. I might disagree with you on some fundamentals in our business here, but really, I was a jerk.
Right.
Hey, that feels so good to admit that to yourself and to do the right thing regarding another person.
One of the things that I find important about that is almost like a warning label is that just because you realize that you were a jerk doesn't mean the other person is going to respond in kind.
Right.
They may have been just as more than likely they were, they reciprocated in the original, and they're not going to apologize. They're just going to, so this is something that it took me a long time to come to terms with is that, when you make amends with people, they're not going to make amends back. There's more than likely, or in my experience, they're just going to say, they're going to feel justified that you were in the wrong. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Of course. And it helps to realize that that's what you're saying is very real and happens quite often, maybe more often than we'd like. Because it's nice if the other person would say, well, I kind of got off too. So maybe the two of us were kind of in a, stepping on each other's toes. Yeah, thank you. But if they don't, if they kind of shrug their shoulder and give you that self-justifying, yeah, I'm innocent. Look, yeah, you were the jerk. Okay. The important thing is not what they do. The important thing is that I did the right thing.
Right.
And that is good for one's spirit.
If they say, okay, I accept your apology, then you have to be okay with that.
Well, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, because them reciprocating and saying I was a jerk too, that happens maybe 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 1,000, it seems. It feels like. Or
they come with a smidgen like, okay, well, let's move on.
Right.
Does that feel good?
No. Right. I guess it's in whether it feels good or not is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. It looks like you got all kinds of fun stuff there.
Well, what I do is lay out possibilities. I'm a possibility thinker, and the possibilities always exceed realities.
Sure.
So,
or the time that we have available.
But yeah. And of course, this is Eric's mindset. So the question always is,
what's on Eric's mindset?
What's on your mind? And, I certainly am happy to share also what's on my mind. But the important thing is our mind also.
Certainly.
This is something that I prepared, way back when I was paid to do a workshop for addictions counselors and practitioners. The city, a department in the city of Detroit said, hey, we'd like to have a workshop on spirituality for workers in the city who work in different addiction settings.
Sure.
So I put together a workshop and put together a sheet. And I don't want to get too far into it. The part that I wanted to kind of get into, and we don't have to do it all in like one conversation right now, is a word that a lot of us use here and there in a common fashion. That's the word soul. S-O-U-L, soul.
Okay.
And of course, that could have many meanings. Boy, that musician has soul. And that means they authentically are the music that they present. Pete Fountain, like, for example, I'll never forget, it was like a spiritual experience. When I heard Pete Fountain play, long ago, I was at some workshop in New Orleans, and that reminds us of Super Bowl, right? But anyway, and Pete Fountain has, in one of the hotels, a Pete Fountain room, dedicated to him, this great clarinetist. And it was just a shot in the dark to say, hey, is Pete Fountain playing tonight at his room? Yes. This is the one night this week. Otherwise, he's traveling. Can we just go and pay at the door? Yeah, there's enough room. Yeah. And I was not far from Pete Fountain by the time I sat down in a chair, you know. He was like maybe 12 feet away or something. And he played a spiritual song tune. And it was like he and the instrument were one emanation of the spiritual energy that came through his, you know, clarinet and the tune. You know, music is the deep harmonization of reality that we humans are so gifted to not only receive, but to create.
Mm-hmm.
Music unites. Music expresses. Music taps our inner child, but also our inner creativity. Anyway,
yeah,
soul. You know, and often people will say, well, they don't have a soul. You know, and when people speak about soul that way, usually what they mean is that person is so cold. They don't seem to have feeling. They don't seem to be an authentic human being. You know, they're robotic or they're like a machine. They have no soul.
Mm-hmm.
But in spirituality, the proper understanding begins with a statement not that we have a soul, but that we are a soul, that we are a living soul. And that's why I use the symbolic illustration of the circle to represent the soul that I am. And then that within that circle is that triangle of the structure of my being, my relationship from a center to myself, to others, and to reality, you know, and to my higher power. And the soul is the totality of that I am. And so in my studies in spiritual growth and healing over many, many years, I came across this incredible older book by a guy named Arnold Tome, Holy Spirit, Human Spirit. And in that, Arnold describes 6 key features of the living soul that we are. Okay? And those key features, when we understand that, we begin to have a sense of how holistic the element of our humanity is, that we're not just a body seeking pleasure. We're not just a mind seeking rational answers. We're not just a bundle of emotions seeking peace and happiness. You know, we're not just a floating spirit not knowing about anything that really matters. No, you know, all of that is part of our soul, mind, body, spirit, mind, body, spirit. And so, you know, these brief descriptions of the 6 qualities of the living soul is, I think, worth talking about. But as you glance at them, what do you think?
Well, there's the first thing I think, because I've spent a lot of time on this.
Yeah, I know.
This is the
nature.
That's
why. Yeah.
We're talking about the nature of your beingness.
That's
and
right.
I would say the soul is not the fundamental nature of the beingness. I would say that I'm still trying to work this out, but okay, so in a relationship, like in a relationship between Eric and Olaf, I am Eric,
yes,
but I also am the awareness of Eric and Olaf. From one perspective, I can say that I am Eric, and I'm concerned about my own, you know, the integrity of my own beingness in a relationship. And from a certain aspect, I can say that I'm universally concerned about, you know, both parties and everything involved in the same way. And I can say from a certain aspect that I am not so much concerned would be the right word, but I'm in observation. I'm giving lovingness to it. But as far as like the comfort level of things and how things turn out, there's less of a concern as much as simply observing it play out itself. So, and I like to, so there is this aspect of myself which I can, which plenty with other people have pointed to, and it took me a long time to get to this. And when I say, it just occurred to me 15 years ago. I was studying with one of the many classes that I took, and all of a sudden we were talking about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, and they kept referring to it in terms of ownership. Your unconscious mind, your conscious mind, your higher conscious mind. And I said, wait a minute, who is the your that they're referring to?
Right. Yeah.
And well, there's many ways to go with that, and we can go on. But the reality is, what is true? Here's what I like, not the reality of it. What I like so far. What is true is that which is unchanging.
If everything is change, and Heraclitus was right to say, change is constant. Our bodies have a whole new set of cell structures every 7 years. So it's almost like leads to the ironic statement, change is unchanging.
Yes. And so
unchanging is change. And words are tricky but let me in my words state, you said a lot of things, but let me see if I can get to a core statement you made in the beginning.
Okay.
You regard, as you understood my statement, you understand it as my saying the soul is the essential essence of who you are.
Right.
And you are saying, I don't agree with that. And I can say, you're right. I am not saying the soul is the essential essence of who one is, but it is the totality of one's expressiveness that is part of, you might say, the personal package that this essential essence expresses itself through.
So the core of my being, the best of my ability of recognizing it, is the non-phenomenal awareness. That is what is unchanging in me.
Yeah.
No matter, throughout my life, everything about me changes, like your body, your DNA, everything about me changes.
Yeah.
What is the same throughout my life is the non-phenomenal awareness. The awareness itself never changes. Now, am I, for all intents and purposes, am I Eric right now? Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Am I, for all intents and purposes, and I like an old friend put it this way, is that the soul is the black box recorder of your lifetime. It's what goes on you from, plane trip to plane trip.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so that is a consistent aspect, but eventually the plane gets decommissioned. And then what, and so that's really what I'm getting at is that potentially, depending on how existence really works with time and what that means to us out of this lifetime, out of this plane of existence. And in a way, this soul exists within the realm of time and space.
Yeah,
somewhere.
we are embodied. We are embodied, and everything comes through our bodies.
So in a way, I am the soul for eternity, but that doesn't mean that I can't have other souls, is what I'm saying. I'm saying in a fractal nature that the awareness that I am is infinite potential, including the ability to have other souls. In a fractal way.
Yeah, I'll have to process that. What came to mind, first of all, in the back of my mind came kind of a cartoonish response that instead of Olaf and Eric coming to St. Peter's gate, so to speak, the gate to so-called heaven.
Yeah.
An angel comes and says to St. Peter, oh, yeah, here's Eric's black box. Oh, let's take a look in Eric's black box. Oh, and here's Olaf's black box. Oh, let's take a look. Because the black box, as it does from planes, records what's really going on.
Sure.
In other words, the consciousness of pilots, only goes so far. The deeper instrumentation, it's all collected in the black box, what the pilot really did, and the metrics of it. And so the sacred opens up the back box of Olaf. Oh, okay. It'd be probably quite embarrassing in many ways. Mm-hmm. You think this about yourself. But seriously, one of the narrative, I'll call it narrative tags about what you are saying is the inner I am. The inner I am is a transcendent aspect within our soul. It is the metaphor of the bicycle wheel, a mind, body, spirit, and the key spokes from our center. And remember, I talked about the ego consciousness. It's kind of like the casing that the spokes, relationship to self, others, and reality, mm-hmm. and higher power, they all hit that ego casing. But at the core of the bicycle wheel is a transcendent element around which the bicycle wheel, the soul, rolls. That transcendent element is not part, essentially, of the bicycle itself. It's like the bicycle wheel has to be connected to that essential transcendent I am.
Yeah.
I am. And as we have said before, I am is a verb. It's not a noun.
Right.
I am expresses self through the structure of ego and through the energies of relating to myself, the spoke, relating to others, like to you right now, and relating to my sense of reality and the higher process, higher powers, higher purpose, higher principles.
Yeah.
That's that sort of thing. So.
Well, I mean, in that context, I like what this is saying.
Yeah.
I definitely would like to dive into it a
so
bit.
let me just comment on, one at a time, and we can kind of illuminate and, kind of lay it open more.
All right. And I can put a link to this as well.
So anyway, the living soul involves 6 essential qualities. And the first one is sentience. The expression, we are sentient beings. We are self-aware. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what that means is we drink in life. In other words, all of that's out there and that we do, we incorporate, we take in. We are what we pay attention to. If I pay attention to rock music and I love rock music, is it any surprise that I begin to live as a rocker? And I've talked to rock artists, and it's not just a way of music. It's a way of life. It's kind of brash, iconoclastic. It's kind of, in your face, and it's kind of communal amongst us. And are you a true rocker or not?
Mm-hmm.
So we drink in life. If I so drink in the Super Bowl and all I live for a month is about the Super Bowl, and I gamble and I talk about it, and and that's all I care about, the Super Bowl, it's like I become a Super Bowl extension, and so
you start thinking in that way. Everything you hear kind of translates in that way. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a quote. Sentience means we have a vital, organic continuity with that hole in which it comes into our being. It's like my soul is like an avenue inviting things in. Okay? We receive realities within. If I'm looking for a partner, I am on the hunt and I look for that little second look. Aha! Is he interested or is she interested? We take it in. And then when we take in the possibility, we're full of kind of excitement and tingle. And then we have to muster up the courage to approach the person and say, hi.
Sure.
So we are sentient beings. And there's a cautionary here. Hey, people, pay attention to what you take in on a constant basis. Pay attention to what you pay attention to.
What you're filling your head with, your environment with. Absolutely.
By your behaviors. And neuroscience, by the way, ascribes to the idea of the extended mind. Our mind self is very much part of the mechanism of sentience, that our mind is more than our brain. Okay? And so, that is what spirituality is about, becoming aware as a sentient being of what I'm taking in.
Sure.
And if I practice meditation and deep silence where I get beyond my own inner bullshit and my own words about things and seek to be illuminated from that which is beyond words, is it any surprise that I come to some kind of illumination? The light, as we talked about last time?
Yeah.
That's all part of our being sentient beings, drinking in life, taking in life.
Yes.
So that's number one.
Well, that was well put. I don't even have anything to add to that.
Okay.
It's wonderful. But
do you want to move to the second one, or is?
Well, I was just thinking. You know what the interesting thing is about when you're. I'm still trying to figure out is that you can either listen to people or you can figure out what you're going to say next. But if you sit and if you truly listen to people, you can get lost and not have anything to say next.
Well, as you say, I think that. Hopefully that covers sentience, at least in an introductory sense.
Well, let's see.
So, does evaluative make sense to you as you read it first? Number 2, evaluative.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at sentience still.
Oh, okay.
Okay, here's another thing about that. And so this is when looking at other animals. Or just any form of life, or really just anything that exists within existence itself, and becoming curious about whether there's an awareness at all behind it. There is an I amness to it. And so sentience, you normally think of, okay, humans are sentient, they're aware of themselves.
Right.
And so then you start to look at other animals and wonder if they're sentient, like others in the great ape family, or like dolphins, for instance.
Highly intelligent
creatures. And if there's an awareness of self there.
Whales. Exactly.
And then you go, okay, so now you look at other life forms next that are clearly not, don't have that type of intelligence. We'll go all the way down to like an ant that has just this hive mind mentality, and we could say, okay, they're just acting out of instinct. But is there an awareness that is similar to us behind that? That there is not maybe a soul, the black box recorder, maybe an awareness that gets the benefit or is tasked with witnessing that aspect of reality, that experience for the divine, like a stand-in. I think you mentioned, the proxy, so to speak. is that there is a level of awareness within that's available. If I have if I use a screwdriver that's worth 50 cents from the local hardware store, it's going to have certain utility to it that it's not going to have the same level of utility to it if I go buy a top level screwdriver that costs me $30 from the local big box store or the local supply store.
Okay.
So in that same way, I'm going to have this higher level of utility being within being able to witness and have the vehicle of the human being, as opposed to the utility I have within the ant. But there still is that level of being able to look through that looking glass. It just only to a certain extent. I can't remember what my point is, but as far as defining sentience, but I like it. Yeah, sentience.
I think your question about other creature kind, whether there's some degree of sentience, I have played with that notion. Because as Suzuki, the environmental philosopher, and from the West Coast, makes very clear in his writings, and this is eco-psychology and eco-philosophy, that we are creature. Well, okay, we are. We have animal inclinations in us, territorialism, a reactive fear, etc., reactive rage. We are creature. So that invites a certain kind of speculative bridging. Well, if we are partly creature, might then the higher intelligent creatures, be partly sentient?
Sure.
And what I have experienced in pets now and then is that they are highly responsive, but they're responsive to how they are treated. And I'm not going to get into a specific story, but way back when we decided to get a little toy poodle to help raise our kids, and we got a 2-year-old toy poodle, but the toy poodle had been given by a cranky old man back to the vet because the cranky old man realized, I'm starting to mistreat my dog.
Okay.
And I'm giving you to vet. Please find a family to adopt this 2-year-old dog. And so was it any surprise that this lovely little poodle growled at me the first time, she saw me, Mandy.
Right.
Responding to how she was treated by a male.
Sure.
And was she drinking me in a sentient way? Or is Pavlovian psychology, meaning just it was patterned into the dog that male means cruelty? And a friend who knew dogs said, hey, Olaf, just back off. Don't push it. Don't try to grab her. Just sit back and wait. Let her come to you. And sure enough, within a month, she started coming up to me. Hi, Mandy.
Right.
Hi. And finally, it comes up on the sofa. Hey, wow. Almost feel like a guy at the bar all excited about someone, giving me that look. And then on my lap. Is that sentience or is that just a responsiveness to my energies that I was projecting?
Right.
That, hey, I love you and I will take care of you with the rest of the family. Please just give me a chance.
Okay. Well, okay. So I want to help support your list here, but then my next question would be, does an animal not have a soul then? But we should probably move on to number 2 because I'm making it complicated. All right. So evaluative.
I like to tip it toward the yes more than the no. But I will not own that that's an empirical true statement. It's more, I'm a romantic, and it's a romantic statement yes, they have a soul of a type. And I would have to be Mr. Spock and mind meld to establish it.
Yeah. I mean, there are some schools of thought, obviously, that would subscribe to the fact that, that a soul goes through all levels of the kingdom, mineral, plant, animal, depending on their level of evolution.
Yeah.
The soul's level of evolution.
Yeah. I think there is a degree of sentience and soulfulness in creature kind. I'll say that I lean that way. Okay. Yeah. And I think arguments can be put for that.
Right.
I believe the Pope answered when people said, do animals go to heaven? Yes. Yes.
Oh, he did? Which Pope? The current one?
As far, but don't quote me.
I'm not going to quote you on it.
I can be stupid and misinformed. And,
yeah.
Okay, so the second quality, and I'm not saying we should get into all six today.
No, that's fine.
But this, interestingly, is the evaluative, and that gets back to our daily inventory of sorts.
Okay.
That the human being, according to Arnold Tome, has an inner filter for one's sentience. As stuff comes in, it doesn't come in like garbage in the raw, but there's a filtering in and filtering out. So this filter evaluates whether or not the reality that seeks entrance into one's being should be received or should be resisted. In other words, we are not just automatically open to anything that wants to come into us, into our being, into our soul. We filter that. And like if I walk into, let's say, a bar and the scene just feels good and the music is cool and it just seems like a friendly place, I decide I'm going to stay here. And have, I don't drink, so I'll have to go to, some kind of non-alcoholic beer. Hopefully they have that, And if I walk into a bar and it just, the vibes are like, whoa. And people give that look and the music is like, grungy music that I don't quite like, at least not right now today. I say, hey, to a friend or whatever, if one is with me, hey, I don't like it here. Why? What's the matter? It's a good bar. Drinks are cheap, and I've met some good people here. I know, but right now, hey, and it's not a matter of I'm right and my friend is wrong, or the bar is as such bad in an objective sense. It's just that my soul is just not ready for that kind of space, the evaluative. And so spirituality is a process by which we fine-tune our evaluative capacities. Is this a good thing to take in or not? And the statement continues, any reality substance can do good or harm once such has been admitted into one's soul. So if I go to the dark web, let's say I'm an angry person, I'm a lonely person, and I feel increasingly angry at society. I don't feel like I'm being treated fairly. People have not given me a chance. I've been jilted by a couple of lovers in the last 6 months, and I'm angry. And I go to the dark web. The dark web gives me material to justify my anger. Of course you're angry. The system sucks. The system is demonic. And we have the real truth. Join us, Darth Vader or the Emperor, welcome Luke. Get in touch with your anger, Get in touch with your loneliness. Get in touch with your pain, and let's express it in dark ways. That can do real harm.
You could just go to the news for that, really. I know what you're saying. You want to get really deep into it, but...
Yeah. So the soul is an open, dynamic process, and it has the evaluative built within it. So what spiritual systems can do, religious philosophies can do, give you criteria for evaluating what is good for the soul. Is ugliness good for the soul, or is beauty? Is selfishness good for the soul, or generosity? Is being cruel to animals good for the soul? Whoa! Cruelty to animals, especially in a young adolescent, is an indicator of antisocial personality disorder stuff. As a psychologist, I can say, kids who love being cruel to ants, that may be an indication of antisocial tendencies ready to bloom. Or it may not be. It may just be anger at the moment because a kid doesn't know what to do with the conflict between the parents.
And it's especially evil since we've already determined that ants are sentient. No.
Well, they are a collective. There seems to be a collective sentience in ants. And here's a case in point. And E.O. Wilson, by the way, who writes about environment, he was an ant specialist. And one of the things that strikes me about anthood, when a fire comes suddenly and ready to consume a community of ants, it turns into a big ball. But you know what that means. Those ants who are on the outside of the ball, they are likely to be burned up. But in kind of rolling away, the inner ants of the ball will survive and get by.
Okay. So evaluative, right? So they're sacrificing themselves for the greater good, or the survival of the colony.
Yes.
Right. I'm curious if there's some sort of hierarchy in the way that they line themselves up, other than like you would imagine that the queen ant or whatever would be at the center.
I wish I could speak to that meaningfully, but I can't. I read E.O. Wilson quite a few years back, and it was cool at the time, but
That was E.O. Wilson that talked about that?
E.O. Wilson, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got a number of books. He's come up with a theory that, we should organize humanity, that we live on half the planet, and half the planet be conserved. Be like conserved woods, and we organize society in a more balanced way to save the environment. He's very concerned that we're destroying the environment, which we are, if we continue like we are.
So from an evaluative nature, that's like determining, okay, this is me and this is not me. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the
Thank
ways,
you. Yes.
Yeah. One of the ways that one of the perspectives that I've come upon in my days is that the reason for this lifetime in this physical density is the fact that it offers such a much higher contrast between the light and the dark, so to speak, the good and the bad, the me and the not me, as opposed to if you can imagine, the realm of the imagination, or the realm of the psychic realm. There can be things that you like and you don't like, things that within that realm that you witness that lead to a negative or a feel good reaction, or a feel good bad reaction, things that are more you or not you. But there's a much higher contrast between those things when they present themselves manifested in the physical life. So that's what I come to think of with that.
Okay. Are we ready to bring in a third element?
Oh, let's do it.
All right.
I'm ready.
I love this word because it is kind of a tricky, sometimes unpopular word in many religious systems. Desire.
Okay.
Desire. And what Tome says is that this is the volitional and purposive capacity of the soul, which comes into play just prior to action. We are desiring creatures. You know, when I came, before we get going, I desire to say hi, to engage with you, but I desire that cup of coffee you faithfully make me.
Yeah.
You know, when I pull into the driveway, I feel anticipation, the desire to get into our next podcast.
Sure.
You know, so the desire is that self-responsible, volitional, and purposive part of me, you know, and infantile religiosity dismisses desire and tries to sort of squash that and say, you know, I'm not going to own desiring. I am seeking only the will of God, the will of my higher power. And yes, that is part of spirituality, but it is not a binary either or.
Well, it's almost
that does not dismiss desire.
Yeah.
Being connected meaningfully to one's higher power, to the sacred, does not preclude desire. Even, dare I say, longing to touch two people skin on skin, desiring body touch, tenderness, two people bonded sexually, pleasuring each other, the pleasure bond, as Masters and Johnson write about in their early research material, the pleasure bond. You know, that sexuality is such a sacred gift to the human being, which is there not only for the sake of procreation, but for the sake of pleasuring each other as an expression of bonding, the pleasure bond. And what Masters and Johnson said is, in intimate, enduring relationships between people who love each other, the sexual co-pleasuring is a high form of desire. You know, in a sense, if you want to put it, lusting for each other. You know, and unfortunately, in Christian history, there has been such a whole raft of emphases and theologies and moralities and ethical constructs that say, no, that sexuality is not to be a form of desired pleasure, but it is a form of obligation to make babies, to make human beings. You know, and there is a theologian that I studied and followed intensely, and one of the courses I taught, that I have taught at the Graduate School of Theology and Ministry, is sexual ethics. Sexual ethics. His name is James Nelson. James Nelson. And he might be rightly regarded as one of the first theologians of sexuality. You know, Matthew Fox also gets very much into the sacredness of the flesh, the sacredness of two people wanting each other, not just on a psychological, connective level and a deep spiritual level, but on a carnal level. Yes, incarnational level, the carnal expression of love and wanting you and wanting your touch and wanting to pleasure you. That is so good and such a gift. And I can't tell you the number of religious systems that just distort that and twist it and smash it, you know. But desire is not just, you know, about the sexuality. Any form of emotion that's attached to longing and wanting to do or wanting to experience, wanting to express. Desire is part and parcel of one's soulfulness. I am what I desire.
Well, so not only is desire, in my perspective, desire is not mutually exclusive with God's will. It's not one or the other.
Exactly.
It is your indication of what God's will is.
Yes, thank you.
How else would you know?
Yeah.
You need how do you know what God's will is? I follow God's will, but how do you know? What's your indication of that? It is your desire. Now you have to, of course, have the caveat of that these are good things that you desire.
Right, they can go to the other side. That it's against the sacred design of reality.
Yeah, these
desire the demonic.
Yeah, and I don't. There's I don't know if you would even use the same word of that desire, but we have distorted the term desire into being something that is just I don't know, sickening carnal pleasure, I suppose.
Yeah, and even though I went there to comment on it, I am not implying that we're basically talking about physical desire, sexual desire, but eros, one of the key words, Greek words for love. You have agape, which means caring for the other without regard to outcomes for oneself. Agape or agape is I love you and I just do it for your sake. Okay. Eros is the erotic, and that's the desiring love. Desiring love. A kid, 5-year-old, starts tinkling on the piano. Ting, 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 ting. And the in-tune parent says, wow, he or she seems interested. Here, sit on the bench. And here, have a pillow. And just sit back. And then, and the delight on the kid's face. The desire to make these sounds. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Wow. And suddenly, in 10 minutes, the kid is doing a sensible little tune. Whoa! Is there something deeper in the child's soul that seeks to come out? Is there musical creativity? Hey, Mozart?
And then the desire, how did you put it? So the pleasure bond, and then Masters and Johnson. So
right.
Not only I think the thing that I think of with regard to religion distorting the desire for the flesh is that clearly sexual desire has to do with creative energy. Sex is our creative faculty on a physical level.
Yes.
Which is akin to the divine itself.
Thank you. Yes.
And so it makes sense to me, and I might be, I don't know if I'm jumping into a conclusion, but it makes sense to me that if you want to control population, which I like to look at with regard to church and state, that you want to keep a population from knowing who they truly are, you go after, you distort the things that are the most powerful and turn them into something that is sort of twisted and dysfunctional. And I think that's definitely where we are in with regard to sex, is that we promote these sexualized things, but then at the same time we're talking out of both sides of our mouth with regard to what sex and desire and how to look at all that.
Right. We have commodified sexuality, and it reminds me of a woman who wrote a book some years back, maybe half a dozen years back, about young adolescent girls who because of the marketplace marketing sexuality, objectify themselves as a sexual object before their full mature sentience, so to speak, meaning a self-understanding that can handle, the loaded impulses or the sexuality. And so what this author in interviews and in her writing talks about is a concern for how young adolescent teenager women objectify themselves as a sexual object to be desired. And so they begin to manufacture themselves to be such. And that is not healthy sexual desiring. That's not what it's about. Objectify yourself and become an instrument of sexualized desire. Maybe I'm not saying it well, but
well, and the way I like to look at that,
a lot of distortion can happen around desire.
Certainly, and then the way I like to look at that is it goes back to like the stealing the light idea. Is that if you don't have another way of contact, of coming into touch with the divine, which is which you can say is your source of fulfillment, your source of energy, then if you're not taught that, then you can look for other ways, and that would be one of the other ways of stealing the light. Is that flash of dopamine, or that flash of energy, or that flash of fulfillment that you get that you can't keep, that you get for another minute for feeling desired by others.
Yeah. There's the inner chemical process. Feeling desired feels good. Like you say, the dopamine elevates, and
and even beyond the physical chemical process, there's mental images there, and there's almost like feeling. There's like with regard to making love, is that there is a chemical process obviously going on there.
Of course.
But there's also this being in touch on a soulful level.
Yep.
And so I would say that there's not just, the reason I point this out is not for the sake of necessarily what you're saying, but that I think we oversimplify and water down things and say, well, that's just a chemical process. But I think there's, something going on at every level.
At every level, including the spiritual. Speaking of desire, the mystics, one of the characteristics of the mystic consciousness is you desire, I'll use the religious term, desire for God, the desire to be meaningfully connected to one's higher power.
Yeah.
And I feel fortunate to have that desire. It's not the same as desire for coffee, desire for touch, desire for great music, desire to, so desire has many different kinds of energy forms and levels. But part of spirituality, at the core of it, is the desire from one's center, one's soul, I am, to be connected to one's higher power with a sense that we are. It isn't just I am, but we are.
I like it. Number 4.
Okay.
Centeredness.
All right. Human soul is a center of will and action. This refers to one's expressive totality, where one is completely oneself. Like, when I'm in the mood just to sit at the keyboard and just play improvisationally, if my fingers work well and the ego is dropped and I'm just in the flow of making music, I am being completely oneself in my lostness. But in my lostness is the oneness. So the lostness almost has a deep connectivity, but with a different feeling about it. So one's expressive totality, where one is completely oneself, where all the powers of the soul are concentrated and act completely together. So, the thing that comes to my mind is NCIS. Okay? NCIS.
The TV show?
Yeah, the TV
Okay.
show. And the key character who just left the show, recently, he was the boss. What was his name? His acting name?
Sorry, not a clue.
Okay. Anyway, I hope that people listening to this know who I'm referring to. He, the tension of being in the field he is of crime and naval investigation into crime and the dangers of that role. One of his moments that is a relief to this heavy, loaded, dangerous kind of work that he does as the boss of a unit, does naval crime investigation.
Okay.
He works on a boat in his basement, slowly working on his boat, building a boat.
Was it Mark Harmon?
That's it.
Mark Harmon.
Mark Harmon. Yeah.
Nice.
Mark, yeah. He was so good in that role. That leader look, he didn't have to use a lot of words to get people to follow him.
Right. Okay.
He just had that energy.
Smoldering.
Just
stare.
Or just come on, whatever. But anyway, but this centeredness, says Arnold, is understood in terms of being at the same time independent and dependent and interdependent with all of life. In other words, don't take the word centeredness as meaning ultimate independence. No, centeredness involves all three ways of relating. Independent, I know what I'm about. Dependent, I'm dependent on the field that I am about. I'm about psychology and theology, but I'm dependent on other brilliant people teaching me, helping me, tooling me. And interdependent, working with colleagues, to understand things psychologically, spiritually, theologically, socially, culturally, economically, environmentally. That's all. So the question to the listener is, if you think of your centeredness as the center of your will and action, what forms of action do you do that you feel most completely yourself? And at the same time, maybe most lost in the flow, and yet in the flow, you are truly being yourself. It's kind of mystical. It's kind of a both and. I am really being myself as I play a tune on the piano. But I'm also beyond self. The tune, the muse, is making my music as well as I am making it.
Right. Okay. So I'm having one of those moments where one of those, I needed to hear this type of moments. So I feel like we've talked about several times now, and I will continue to do so, where the ego sort of, and this is a big thing culturally, is like we're trying to figure out the whole ego death versus just the ego letting go type of thing. And in my experience, as my ego starts, goes through the process of letting go and letting go to the heart and the higher self, and letting go to God's will, so to speak. That there are the experience is very much like I'll begin to do something. I'll begin to open my mouth, for instance, to talk on this microphone, and have no clue what I'm about to say.
Okay.
And that would be like a centeredness to me, is where I'm not, I'll recognize that I have no clue what I'm about to say. I'll get it like a picture. There's a picture there. I'm not just BSing my way through talking.
Right.
There's a sort of an idea. I don't have anything scripted. I keep hitting this microphone. I got to get a little bit further away. I don't have anything scripted. I'm not exactly sure what I'm trying to say, but you come to a trust within yourself of having this. There's an I don't know how to say it yet, but there is an independence and there's a codependence in that.
Am I hearing you? In terms of those two factors of desire and centeredness, are you saying sometimes as you approach a moment or an opportunity to say or do, you might not be exactly clear in the volitional purposive sense, nor exactly clear as a center of will and acting. You're kind of not quite together yet in terms of desire and centeredness. But are you saying that you trust that if you authentically engage with whatever is there in front of you, it'll come?
Yeah.
That you're not scared to move forward without the clarity of desire and centeredness in the moment. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. Because you come to sort of this trust within yourself, and it doesn't always work out. You don't always know the details. Like I don't know exactly what I'm saying. But I know enough to express it to where you can kind of get it, and actually say it a little bit better than I say it. And but then, there is this trust. There's this. I keep linking the word centeredness with trust.
Wow! Thank you.
Yeah, and so there's like this. I'm not in this. I have to be in control. There is this recognition that to some extent I'm independent, and to some extent there is this. Olaf will pick up where I'm leaving off, and there's this.
And you will make clear what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that the conscious mind doesn't have to have all the pieces.
Right.
The unconscious is going to bring some things forth.
Yes.
Just by taking the action.
Yes.
And the higher conscious and God and it will come together through all the elements that exist. I don't have to be this controlling conscious entity.
And that the phrase that comes, very popular phrase, trust the process.
Right.
We are process beings. We are expressive process beings. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The whole idea of trust, and you could say faith is a form of entrustment. Faith is that. My faithing is a verb, and faithing is a form of entrusting myself. And to what am I entrusting myself? I live in the entrustment of a higher power that is love, that is compassion, that is harmonizing. And in my better self, I seek to be a stand-in for those qualities with people. Sure. Absolutely. We're created to be the sacred stand-in. We are the substantiation of the sacred's desires for what the sacred desires humans to be.
The sacred's desires, right.
As I put it, the humanity of God, which of course strikes a lot of people as almost like a contradiction. No. The spirituality, the spiritual principles of biblical thinking and Christian theology is that there is humanity in God, and it's in terms of the humanity in God that we were created. But that's, I can argue that in theological narrative if I have to, but that's not our purpose here.
Yeah, well, there's other, there's definitely schools of thought that look at that specifically, like the originating I don't know if I want to point any out, but the originating idea where source creates the vessel, that's a Kabbalistic perspective, is the source creates the vessel for the sheer purpose of giving, which you could associate with being humane or a humanistic perspective.
Right.
It wants nothing more than to give. Until, that vessel itself says, no, I don't want to earn anything without, I don't want to be given anything without earning it. And I want to be like the Creator itself. I want to be, godly, and I want to get, not only receive, but to give.
Right. Because to be godly can also be to receive.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right. To appreciate the gifts of life. At my age, every awakening day is truly a gift.
Yeah, right. Well, and you can also say that, a lot of people go to the extent of how can God let these types of things happen where people have to go through extreme pain and suffering. But you can even say that is humane. It is definitely extreme, but it isn't not humane to be able to allow people to go through the pain that they need to be able to go through in order to grow and evolve and to become the next level. Because if people don't go through pain, they don't become the next version of who they are.
Yeah. And the spiritual life involves working with, coming to terms with pain, with suffering. And that's another whole discussion. In terms of this list, what I'm feeling is this is good enough for today on this stuff.
Sure.
Because the last two are
bigger topics,
heart and spirit.
Yeah.
So,
we'll
but again, the sentient, the evaluative, the desiring, and the centeredness elements, are I'm quite satisfied in how we have talked about those.
Okay.
And appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, we can pick that up with the last two elements are heart and spirit.
Yeah.
We can pick that up next time.
Yeah. But anything else?
No, sir. I think that was good.
I think that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.